Okay, well, welcome to the E-Rate 470 session workshops. We are having 16 of these workshops statewide to be followed by the 471 workshops. The first announcement of the day is to say that we will be having 471 workshops. You have not seen a flyer or release on those because USAC has not identified the window. And so I don't want to schedule workshops and then have to cancel them and reschedule them if they don't match up with the window. So as soon as USAC announces when the 471 window is, I will be calling around and scheduling probably the same locations for 471 workshops. So my name is Mindy Fiskus, and I am the Digital Access Coordinator for the Learning Technology Centers of Illinois. And I have been with the LTCs in their former structure of the regional structure since 1999. So I have been doing E-Rate as long as most of you have, if not longer. For those of you who know Ricardo Tostado back in the day when he did the tour of the state, I'm referring to myself as Ricardo Tostado 2.0. So if you know him well, please let him know. I'm an improvement upon him and see what he thinks. So I am serving as one of your Illinois State E-Rate coordinators. Jamie Bader at the State Board of Education is the other E-Rate coordinator, and we've divided up the rules like this. So if you need verification from ISB, paperwork signed, something to say what your student counts are, questions for an audit, ISB would be your place to go. So Jamie Bader would be your person to go to if you have a concern or an issue that needs validated. If you need help with the form and you're inside something and you say, wait, which form is next? That's me. So I will be helping you through the actual process itself. I've also on various other state projects, one of them being the Illinois Classroom Connectivity Project, which we'll talk a little bit about today. Another being the Illinois Century Network Advanced Engineering Task Force. So if you are part of the ICN network, there are some idiosyncrasies within the form that we will be completing today. But I do have direct contacts with them if we have a question that needs to be answered by ICN. So I live in Robinson, Illinois, which is down in the southern part of Illinois on the Illinois side of Terre Haute, Indiana. We make the Heath Candy Bar. So if there happens to be a Heath Candy Bar on your table, I brought it directly from Robinson. Not necessarily true, but that is the only place in the nation where we make the Heath Candy Bar. When we sold our chocolate factory to Hershey, that was part of the deal. So if you've ever had a Heath Candy Bar, it comes from my hometown. My husband and I own a liquor store in Robinson, and I like to tell people that so that you all like me better. So there is today we're going to cover a lot of things. So we're going to focus on the Category 2 budget, how much money might be available out there for you guys, finding out how much money you've spent and how much money you can take advantage of and what you can spend that money on. We're also going to talk about the form itself. Notice the filing of the form is towards the bottom. We are going to cover a lot of other information today that I think is beneficial for the form. So we are here for 3 hours. We may take the entire 3 hours and we may not. We'll see what kind of questions you have coming forth. We do have some partners with us from Education Superhighway. So we have Joe, who is our fiber build expert in the corner. And then we have Hannah and Brian, who are our experts on some of the other resources and tools that Education Superhighway brings to the front. So they can feel free to jump in with information, and Joe will be presenting part of the session because fiber builds are a bit more complicated than what most of us are used to. Is anybody in the room interested or thinking about the possibility of building fiber this year? So there's at least one of you. Others are shrugging their shoulders like, I might. It depends on if it's worth it to me. We will be updating our student information today. So if you did not bring with you some kind of, I think it's called it was the Fall Housing Report, and I think now it's the Data Demographics Report from SIS. It will list for you your total number of students for this year. It was taken October 1st, and then how many are eligible for free and reduced lunch. If you are CEP, that is community eligibility. That is a different portion where all of your students in the building get free and reduced lunch. Everybody gets a free lunch. And so that's a different kind of form that we'll be looking for, but we will be updating that information. So if you didn't bring that stuff with you today, you are not locked in and have to do it today, but now would be the time to, on the side, email your bookkeeper or your person who does SIS and say, what are those totals, if you did not bring them. So the first thing that we will talk about is the form process itself, and I want to make something pretty clear. So since I've taken this position 6 months ago, what I have learned is that we are lacking some communication between our applicants and our service providers who provide you service. And so I just want to kind of explain a couple things here. We are filing the 470 today for next school year. So we file now for what's going to happen next school year. So we're estimating what our costs might be, and we're going through the process now for starting July 1st of 2018 and moving forward. So we file our 470, and that is our Christmas list, say, of the things that we might be needing from E-Rate. Then we wait 28 days where we have a silence, and we don't talk to our providers other than to just say, yes, thank you for your bid, when they give something to you. So there's a 28-day period where people can reply to your bids. The 470 is considered an RFP, and so you're putting out an RFP and then you're waiting 28 days to get that bid back. If you would like to, you can put in the form somewhere in one of the notations today, I will not accept bids after X date. Please make sure that that date is the 28 days because that is required by the program, but that will stop you from having various other bids after, say, I think January 7th or whatever the date is when we do the math today. That way you can stop getting bids, and anybody who talks to you after that you can ignore, but you do have to pay attention to the bids that come to you within that 28-day window. That is really the only time that you can't talk to your providers. So once you have done your review, picked a provider from your bids, you can communicate with them and say, and now I need a little bit more detail about this. So I need more information about what type of service you're giving me, a model number for a product, something like that. You can ask that after you've chosen your vendor. So it's not like you have to be completely silent and not talking to your vendor till the 471. You do have, as long as you wait the 28 days, some time to get clarification before you file the 471. And that is really important because a lot of people, when you get into the 471, especially now that it is on the EPC portal, the detail is way more involved than it was before. And we come to those sessions and people start talking to each other and saying, oh, well, I think I have the managed switch. And somebody else will say, no, that model's the unmanaged switch. And it gets a little confusing. So please just take your 28 days, pick your provider with your matrix, and then you can verify with your provider the details of those bids before we come back for the 471. You can then communicate with your provider the whole rest of the way. So we will file the 471 together. Again, like this, we're all clicking B because we're schools, not libraries kind of situation. We'll step by step go through the form today, and we'll do that for the 471 for you. And then there's this period of PIA review, which is when it's a total quality management sort of thing, where PIA calls and says, can you give me a copy of that bill? Or do you have something to show evidence of what your free and reduced lunch totals are? Something like that. So there's a question period where you'll get answers from USAC. Again, you can call your provider if you do not know the answer. It is not a moratorium of speak. It is communicate with people to get them the information they need. Once that's done, they issue you a funding commitment letter and you file a 486 to say, yes, I want the money. So I want stuff maybe. Yes, this is actually the stuff I want. Yes, you said I could have the money and I still do want it. So I always thought that this was the kind of stupid form of the process because obviously I've gone through all this paperwork. I want the money. I have recently learned this form is more important than just saying, yes, I want the money. It is checks and balances in place for you guys. So this ensures to USAC that your service has actually started and stops that happening from a provider saying they're giving you service if they aren't yet. So this is the start of service form. It's also the form that you must certify that you are filtering content from your students, harmful content from your students, which you all are, but that is the form that says, yes, I have some kind of a filter that's filtering the harmful content. After filing that form, you have a choice. And again, the communication with your service provider is very important here. Your choice is you can get discounts on your bills, or you can file a form and get a lump sum reimbursement. And the bare form is what we file for lump sum reimbursement. Some providers prefer that you pay your bill, the full bill the whole time, and get a lump sum of reimbursement. I've been asked frequently over the last 2 weeks, do I have to wait till the end of the year for this form? The answer is no. You can turn that form in as often as you'd like. You could file a bare form monthly if you'd like. USAC is probably going to ask you for proof that you've paid that bill. So quarterly might be something that you want to do if you have a large bill that you're paying and you want to get that money back in the district. I know several school districts who do it twice a year, so they'll do it in December for the first 6 months of the year and then July for the remaining 6 months. Most people just file it one time. So you'll see messages from me on the listserv statewide that say around, this year it was in October, and I said the deadline is coming up for your 486s, depending on when you got funding. And the deadline on the BEAR form to request your money from last year is the 26th of the month. And I sent that out a week in advance, and I got literally 73 emails asking me questions about the BEAR form. So that made me a little bit more aware of the situation and how we're all check out of E-rate, let's say, for that time frame. And I will try to be way more proactive next year in reminding you in August and September that you can now collect your money. Again, if you choose to get discounts from your bills, there's probably some kind of a form that you will have to fill out from your provider to say, yes, I want those discounts. Once you've filled that out and you get the discounts, it is their responsibility to file a form with USAC and collect the money directly from them. Are there any questions about the various forms? If you find that you have taken over E-rate for someone in your building and you're going, wait a second, where am I, and were these forms done last year, I can help you do that today. There is a wonderful site called E-rate Central. They are actually E-rate consultants who will file for you, but they have a lot of really nice resources on the site, and there's a tool on their site where you can look up your district and see what forms have been completed, what hasn't, how much money might still be sitting there waiting to be collected, things like that. And so I can help you search for your district if you're new to the district and want to kind of know where that is. It's also a really nice tool for new people to look through the tool and kind of get an idea of how that form flow works and about when those were approved. Questions or comments from the group? You're so quiet. Such good students. Each year, USAC decides what is eligible for the program. And so they come in forms of Category 1 and Category 2. This is just an example. This is not an endless list. But basically, Category 1 are internet access services. It used to have phones in it. So those of you who are 90% discount districts, which would be 75% or greater free and reduced, I think. We'll see on the next slide. If you are a 90% district, you can still get 10% back on your phone lines this year. I did not add it to the list because I didn't want to confuse everyone else, because primarily most of us are no longer eligible for phone service. We will be focusing on internet access service. You can even, you'll see there, least fiber has lit and dark options, so there are multiple options for getting internet to you. You also have the option of internet transport, so those of you who are taking advantage of our state network would apply for internet transport and then internet access directly from them. It covers old lines. If you have a T3 line still somewhere in your district to a building, those copper services are covered. If you have brand new fiber to your building, those services are covered as well. The build out of that network to you, as well as the monthly cost, is covered. So all kinds of internet access options, and when we get into the form, we'll talk a little bit more about what kind of options you might choose and why. There are some changes this year that make things a little bit more fun. Each year they make a small change just to keep everybody on their toes, right? Category 2 is what I like to call the stuff. It is the stuff that makes your network work. It is not phones. It is not computers. No, you cannot buy Chromebooks with your E-rate funds. So that is the most prevalent question by administrators who just first get into E-rate is, what can I spend that Category 2 on? It is the things that are listed here. The full list is linked here on the spreadsheet on the USAC site. Anybody want to make a point of something else that you might get here that you don't see? On my shortcut list. Yes.
So the only thing I would add to that is that there is a possibility in Category 2 to get an entire managed service.
True.
So that would be managed internal broadband services, and that's where a vendor would bid to come and place the equipment, actually manage the equipment for you, and then refresh it every 3 to 5 years or so. And they'll charge you a per student fee per year in order to do that. And I've seen probably 3 to 5% of the applicants go with a MIBS rather than buy their own gear and provisioning their own service for their lands.
And there are whole states where the entire state is done as a managed service, and someone comes in and they own all the equipment and they manage all of your wireless for the entire state. We do have a state contract for that on the Illinois Century Network 470 that was posted 2 years ago. There is a contract for managed service, so if that's something that you're interested in, let me know today, and we will go out and seek that out for you on the ICN page. Most of the school districts in the state, from all of the figures that I've looked at, are actually purchasing the stuff and managing it themselves, but there are a handful who do a managed service. So if you're interested in that, we can get that for you. The other thing that's not listed here is support for these things. So you can file for support each year, and I know a lot of our school districts work with a local provider who comes in 1 day a week or something and manages your network. For a lot of our really small schools who don't have a tech director on staff, that's a service that would be eligible for E-rate. You are going to have your service provider break out how much is network support versus how much is fixing the virus or putting the keyboards back on the keys so that the little kiddos picked off. So one way or another, you can apply for those things as well. Category 2 is a budget, is like a formula budget for you, and we'll talk about what those budget figures look like here in a minute. So there isn't like an infinite amount of money that you can get here, but there is a budget that you can file for your district. At last week's session, somebody pointed out you can also do power supplies, so a backup power supply generated thing is here, a UPC, as well as racks. Please note, if you are getting a rack or a power supply or something like that, if USAC asks you what's plugged into this power supply or what is on this rack, if you say anything other than the equipment to run my network, they will make you cost allocate a section out. So if you tell them that there is a server on your rack that takes up 1/4 of the space, they're going to take 1/4 of the cost away from you. So please note that moving forward, that only your network equipment should be on and using your equipment to make it eligible. It does not necessarily mean that the stuff had to be purchased from E-rate. It just means it has to be one of the components that is eligible for E-rate.
Mindy, one other thing with that, and I'm sorry to keep
Oh, no, it's fine. It's what we're here for.
There are two things. Caching servers are eligible. So if you have specific servers that are used to cache content from the first time it's downloaded, and it makes more efficient use of your upstream internet connection that way, those are eligible. A lot of times you'll have a server that plays a couple of different roles, but if you're caching assessments, for example, and that's the main role of that server, you can apply for either cost allocated reimbursement of the function that server is doing for caching, or if you have dedicated caching servers, those are 100% eligible for reimbursement. And again, you have that. It's now $153.47 per student with inflation in order for category 2. The second thing is, and I don't know if I'm sure you're going to go over this sometime today, but where Illinois has state master contracts that you're eligible to purchase from, you can either use that purchasing vehicle or you can use the bid as one of your competitive bids.
Right. So, and we'll talk about that when we get into the bids and to the category 2 stuff. There are state master contracts for equipment, again, through the Illinois Century Network, and I'll show you where those are on the website. You can use those as one of your bids. So if you find that the bids that you're getting from other providers in the state are not as low as the deals that have been figured by ICN, you can absolutely use their bid as one of yours. And choose it as the provider and go through that partner. I found that a lot of the school districts are working with those same providers that did those state bids and can get equal, if not better, pricing on your own from a 470. So we can take a look at those as well. The one other thing that I didn't point out, and thank you, Joe, for interjecting because it reminded me, if you have a firewall device that also filters for your students, the filtering is not eligible. So if you put in a firewall device and you say, I'm using it for firewall and filtering, please spell out ahead of time what percentage of that is the filtering component. If you don't spell it out ahead of time, then you have to go back and forth with a PIA reviewer to discuss what percentage it might be and what percentage they have versus what your vendor told you. If you spell it out up front, yes, I know this SonicWall is also doing my filtering and that's 25% of the cost of it, so I've cost allocated that out up front, you are smooth sailing. But if you try to negotiate that in PIA review, I've seen people actually get the entire firewall thrown out because they couldn't get a timely enough response to USAC to answer those questions. So know that that's the case. Some of you are using firewalls that don't do your filtering and a different component for your filtering. That's not an issue for you. But if your firewall serves dual purposes, that has been an issue the last couple of years. So figuring out how much you get back is one of the things we're going to do today. This is your National School Lunch Program. Please make a note, if you are CEP and everyone gets lunch in your district, that does not mean that you are automatically 100%. To the chagrin of some of my Southern Illinois districts who wanted to fight for that, that doesn't work that way. USAC does not recognize that as 100%, though it will say 100% in the chart that I'm going to show you here in a minute. Depending on how much you get back, depends on what your free and reduced lunch rate is. So if figured on the district level, so it is the district average. If you are a unit district pre-K to 12, you have to take all of those buildings into consideration, and that is on your SIS data form that we are looking at today. So if you find that you are 53% as a district total and you are a rural district, which the majority of our districts are, that is an 80% discount level, meaning you are still responsible for 20% of your cost. In category 2, that's the same situation. The only difference being the ones that are circled here. So the 90% for category 1, the max percentage in category 2 is 85. So even if you are one of our poorest districts in the state and you can file for that 90% in category 1, you will still be responsible for 15% when it comes to the category 2 stuff. It's been a little bit tricky, and I do have a handout up here if you need to go back and explain it to someone else, because when you figure your budget for category 2, USAC gives you the budget, the entire pre-discount budget, and then you kind of have to do the math of how much is your portion. It gets a little confusing for people when they're trying to determine how much money they have left, and they're like, wait, but I only spent this amount, and on some records, USAC shows that a little bit weird, and you're looking at the amount that USAC actually paid, when in reality, the budget was a little higher than that, and we can work through that today if you need it. So from looking at those reports, you can look at that. For the CEP schools, there is a form that you fill out once every 3 years. It's supposed to save you time and energy on your end and get everybody free lunches in your district. So you fill it out once every 3 years, and you're listing the directly certified students for various programs, meaning if the family takes advantage of SNAP or other programs in the state, you can directly certify those kids as that and get the entire family, no matter if they're grade school or high school, and certify them on this form. There are people reporting to me, yes, but my student count has gone up since 3 years ago. The form's due in April, but I'm turning this in now. What does that look like? So that's something that Jamie and I are discussing later today to figure out what totals you really should be using. There were several districts last year who tried to use their current fall housing report numbers because you had 50 more students, but you were CEP, so the form that ISB had to verify for you was from 2 years ago with those numbers. So if you are in that situation, please do touch base with me before you leave today, and let's see if we can find the best scenario for you guys to file. That being said, if you are CEP, please remember to identify the students still in your student management system to be in your SIS report, because our new funding structure in Illinois is on 19 different factors, and one of them is poverty, and that poverty is being collected by your SIS data. So the CEP schools have sometimes not been including that in their data reports to ISB because it's not something they're now collecting because they only do it every 3 years. And that could really throw off your financial totals moving forward for the amount of money that your district is getting. And I think that went across Tech Geeks, and it's been a conversation about it. If you want to hear a horror story, please reach out to Butch Wilson at Christopher. He would like to share with you all his story because he likes to share. But there are a lot of school districts who weren't really keeping track of that very well because they were doing it with CEP and found that made a huge difference in their counts. So please do keep that in mind moving forward. Most of you are also the person who is in charge of your data reports to ISB.